closing higher.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. We've got breaking news. Wall Street roaring back to start the week, even as the engagement in Libya threatens to become a long, protracted effort. Now, Pentagon officials say the no-fly zone will soon be extended to the capital of Tripoli.
But today's stock market rally did little to help ease oil prices. NYMEX crude soaring more than 1%, settling over $102 a barrel. So could we avoid military intervention in the Mideast if we boosted drilling here at home? Our next guest told Congress just that last week. He said we need to start cranking up production right now.
Joining us is Jim Noe. He is Senior Vice President and General Counsel of Hercules Offshore. So how was your message received? We know that Republicans like the idea of drilling more. What about Democrats?
Well, I think what we're seeing in the Middle East and in North Africa, and what we're seeing, frankly, at the gas pump and gas stations across America, the American public, and I hope both Democrats and Republicans, are now realizing that if we rely on dangerous, unstable regimes like Libya, we're going to pay more at the pump. And it's unnecessary. The United States of America
did you convince?
I
have to ask you specifically, though. Did you convince any Democrats of that message?
Well, look, this is not a partisan issue. We've had very strong support from Democrats, granted, from Gulf Coast states like Texas and Louisiana, but this is not a partisan issue. You could watch your channel today and see the dangers of relying on OPEC. OPEC controls about 2/3 of the world's oil reserves, and we buy almost $1 billion of oil a day from mostly OPEC and other unstable regimes. And if we do that, we're going to see spikes in oil prices like what we're seeing today, and gasoline prices at 2-year highs. And it's not necessary. We have oil and gas in our own backyard. We've been producing oil and gas offshore since the late 30s. We invented offshore oil and gas production. We know how to do it safely, and we don't have to buy oil from Gaddafi and line his pockets so he could turn weapons on his own people.
Jim, I hear the frustration in your voice. I get it. We only have, what, 2 deepwater drilling permits, one given to Noble Energy and the other given to Shell. But how much oil and natural gas are we talking about in the Gulf? Would it really move the needle in the short term? Because I think it takes about 10 years, some say, to bring American oil online into the markets.
No, that's right. And that's one of the frustrating aspects of hearing the Obama administration continually take credit for the increase in production we've seen over the last couple of years. That's really tantamount to you buying a farm right at harvest season and then bragging about all that you've done to produce the crop when you haven't planted any new seeds of your own. You're absolutely right that unless we start planting seeds and start planting and getting the obstacles that have been imposed on the offshore oil and gas space lifted, we're going to have production problems years to come. If you don't plant seeds this year, you won't have crops next year. And you don't have to take my word for it. The federal government, they have an Energy Information Administration. They came out with a study a few weeks ago that said that they predict that oil production in the U.S. will decline 14% in 2011 and 2012. A total of 45 million barrels, 450 million barrels, strike that, 450 million barrels of oil that we'll have to go and buy from places like Libya, Saudi Arabia, Angola, Nigeria, and very unstable regimes.
Okay.
So I think
if you have a coalition, Jim, if you have a coalition of Democrats and Republicans who want to drill more, can't they override some of the veto power of the EPA and the others stopping production?
Well, it's a very good question. We haven't seen it to date. What we need is the will to drill. We have the means to drill, and we have the oil and gas offshore and onshore as well. We're the 3rd largest oil-producing country in the world. We have the oil. We just don't have the will to drill, and the will to drill needs to come from the White House. It doesn't need to come from me or members of Congress. We in fact, need the White House to move because they ultimately hold the trump card in issuing permits, and we haven't seen permits.
Jim, let's talk about the shallow drilling. How much of these permits involve low-risk wells with provable safe prevention methods that sit right on the rig? How many of those rigs are you talking about here that could be jump-started pretty quickly and be relatively safe?
Well, you're exactly right, Liz. We've been drilling shallow water wells since the Truman administration, since Harry Truman was in the White House and the Lone Ranger was debuting on television. So we've been doing this very safe. It's mostly natural gas wells now. Much of the oil's been depleted, although there is some oil in the shallow water as well. We use blowout preventers on the rig itself. We had nothing to do with the Macondo accident, yet we were shut down and were faced with a moratorium for a month and have only seen a trickle of permits since April. The Deepwater is even worse, and now we're in this rut of we hold press conferences every time the federal government issues a permit. In fact, there was a press conference earlier today about a Shell exploration plan being approved. And all that's good and fine, but this is a daily occurrence. This needs to be a daily routine occurrence. They need to issue permits and allow us to go back to work, or we're going to rely more heavily on places like Libya.
All right. Thanks to Jim Nose, Senior Vice President and General Counsel of Hercules Offshore. Good to be with you today, sir. Thank you so much.
Jim.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks, David.
So what